Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. We hope you've begun to learn and apply the principles of gathering families, not just individuals, in documenting your ancestry. Today, Shelley is going to demonstrate with a case study a very helpful idea for doing just that. She calls it mind mapping. This method or technique is helpful because it reminds us to focus on finding all siblings and their parents before moving on to another generation. As we've said before, sometimes we hear people say, "Why should I care about other family members?" referring to half siblings or in laws. I'm only interested in my direct line. Shelley and I call this very narrow view the telephone pole approach to building family trees. This approach is taken with an eye to finding direct ancestors only. It completely ignores the fact that each of these individuals had other family members who they loved and cared about. Telephone poles standing next to each other are not nearly as attractive nor complete as a weeping willow tree, with several branches going up and down. Remember, we're trying to build one large worldwide family tree, not a forest of telephone poles. One last caution, the telephone pole approach to documenting a family tree also creates a false feeling of personal possession of ancestral relationships. Have you ever heard someone say that this is my family and nobody should mess with it? Again, this reflects a false conclusion about their ancestral relationships. The truth is that any one of our great grandparents, to whatever generation, has multiple descendants who actually share these ancestral relationships. We consider this to be one of the greatest blessings of building one large worldwide family tree together. It reminds us that we are all brothers and sisters, regardless of when or where we live, and that our common heritage is with our Heavenly Father.
Thanks, Mark. This technique of tracking what I know, making comparisons, and asking questions is actually a technique of a diagram. I call it a mind map, and it helps me to sort out information, or sometimes it helps me to focus what I want to learn. So I'd like to show you a case study of where I have used this. I'll share my screen now so I can share that with you. And this particular one example case study is sorting out information. I've drawn a map to identify relationships. The specific goal of this particular mind map is who is the father and mother of each child. I came across this census. It's a 1920 census in Hempstead, Arkansas. And it's the Jack Walton family. I put his family search ID number there so I can remember and keep track of him. And in this 1920 census, he had 11 children. 11 children are listed, including some stepchildren. The parents are the same age. They were born in 1891 and they were both 39. So there's two sets of children, it looks like. There's actually two sets of 4 children and then 3 more. Well, to be able to keep track of this, I wanted to show you a little bit more information here as far as what the census had indexed. So here's the household: Jack Walton, Dana Walton, but when I looked at the image, it actually looks like Dawn on the image. And then here I have 4 children who look like they're all in a row: Robert, UL, Deline, Irene. Notice their ages. They're 18, 16, 13, and 10. So since they have the last name of Walton, you kind of assume that Jack is their father. Then I have 3 more children here: Cornell, Kelly, and Virginia. And they are 4.5, 2.5, and 1. There's quite an age gap in between them. So that looks like kind of 3 extra children. And then down below it on the image, there is Formby Ferris Walton, Lewis Walton, and actually on the image, it looks like Lois, and it is a daughter. So I doubt it's actually spelled like the male form. And then there's Clifton, and he's listed as a step in parentheses right after his name. And then there's Gary Walton. So I notice over here, Formby Ferris is listed as a stepson. Lois is listed as a daughter, and there's no indication of a stepchild, but I'm making the assumption that she is also a stepdaughter because she's in this row of 4. I have to make some assumptions and then try and prove them right or wrong. Clifton is a stepson and Gary's a stepson. The interesting thing, see, why I believe these have to be additional, have an additional mother, is because there's age 16, which matches up with UL, and then there's 14, which is kind of here, right? Could be here, but then there's age 12 that maybe could fit in here, and then there's age 9 that fits there. But I'm going to make the initial assumption that there are 4 children that belong to probably Jack, because they're not listed as a stepson. And then there's 3 children here that probably belong to Jack because they're not listed as a stepson or daughter. And then these 4 children probably are, their mother is Dana because they are listed as a stepchild to Jack. So that's my initial assumptions, but I need to draw it out to make sense of what I've learned and to be able to build on that. So here is my opportunity to draw it out. I have listed Jack here and Dana here. Then to their union, I am making the assumption that F. Cornell, 4.5, M. Kelly, 2.5, and Virginia, 1, are theirs together, that is their mother and father. But I don't really have any proof of that yet. Then I'm making the assumption that Jack had question mark for a first wife and had these 4 children, Robert, UL, Deline, and Irene. Then I'm assuming this is also a second marriage for Dana, and she brought into this marriage the stepchildren to Jack, which are Formby Ferris, F. Lewis, Clifton, and Gary. Okay, so now I want to go and find out more information. I've made some assumptions. I've looked at this. My goal is to identify who is the mother and the father of all of these children, and I need additional proof for that. So I'm going to go back. This is a 1920 census. I'm going to go back and see if I can locate them 10 years earlier. And what I'm probably thinking then is I'm going to find Jack with a first wife. So as I look at the 1910 census, here I find a household that I think is that the right one. Here's the relationships. It's John H. Walton, which previously was Jack, but Jack and John are a common nickname. Jack's common nickname for John. And he's 10 years younger. That's a good sign. Now he has a wife called Modena. Dawn or Dana, possibly a nickname, but probably not, because there's 2 years difference in their age. She's 2 years older than John or Jack. So the real cinch here is I have Robert, UL, Deteen, and Queenie. So those are 4 sets of children that remind me a little bit. Here, let me show you. That's Robert, UL, Deteen, and Queenie. I have Robert, UL, Deline, and Irene. So the fact that those children are all 10 years younger and that they're in the right location makes me believe this is the family. And then also Jack has a brother named Charlie who's living with them. So I could go back and search for those 2 to try and find out more. But right now I'm focusing on who is the mother of these children. And that really helps me to keep that focus. I've decided I have this map. I'm going to find that focus. So I want to do a little bit of comparison chart here. Here is the 1910 census information on the right, and I have matched them up. I am going to say that's probably Modena right there in that blank box. And then I'm matching up Robert, Jewel or UL, Deteen, which is Deline, and Queenie, which is Irene. Now, Queenie is only 1 in this census, so I could see that could be a nickname for Irene. But it still feels a little bit sketchy for me, but I think I'm on the right track. And so now I'm going to find out more information. So the questions that I want to ask is, okay, if Dana is not Modena, then what would be a death estimate for Modena? Probably between 1910 and 1916, because she was alive in the census of 1910. Right here, we saw her right there. So she was alive then, so it had to be after that. And then baby Cornell was born in 1916, according to her age, and she was the oldest of the 3 extra here. So she could have died in childbirth here, or she could have died between these 2 children. So this child could be Modena's, and she could have died in childbirth. So let's just look at my questions again here. So If Modena died in childbirth with baby Cornell, then John would marry Donnie quickly with an infant in the house. He would need someone to take care of the infant and his other children, and he would very likely marry a widow, because probably someone with additional children. So that starts to make some common sense logic. So now I find another record, and it does list the 1918 World War I draft registration. John's wife is Mrs. Donnie Walton. So she is listed as Dawn or Dana, looked like Dawn in the census, the 1920 census. So that would make sense that his previous wife, Modena, had died before 1918, and she is listed then, he's listed with a new wife. The second of the children, the extra three children, was born in 1918. So as I look here, Kelly was born in 1918. So he would be Donnie's also. So that would move up their marriage, and his mother. So she would also be Virginia's mother. So here I'm looking back at this and saying, okay, well, I'm pretty sure then Dana or Dawn is the mother of these two children. And it's very possible then that she did, Modena did die in childbirth with Cornell. And Jack or John married quickly, and they had another child the next year. So those are some of the questions I'm starting to ask. But if I didn't have my mind map to guide me, it could be very confusing. And then, of course, I draw notes and write my questions all over the map. Okay, so then I'm thinking, I can find an obituary of somebody here to give me a little bit more information. Well, I'm going to take Virginia's obituary. I'm going to look for that one because Virginia is the youngest one. I'm most likely to find an obituary or death information about this youngest child. So I'm going to look for an obituary, hoping to give me more information. So here I have it. Virginia Walton Mayton's obituary. She was born in 1919, gives me her married name. And it also says that Virginia was a fierce protector of her family. Her table was always set with cornbread for anyone who stopped by, and that she loved the hymns and read the Bible every day. Thought that was a great kind of conclusion to her obituary. But what I was interested in is, who is she related to? This was a key factor for me. She was one of 4 siblings and 10 half siblings. And Kelly is listed as her brother, which is, I was making that assumption that they both had the same mother. So now I'm going to look at my mind map again with a little bit more additional information. Here I have siblings, Kelly and Virginia. So I'm missing 2 siblings right here if I make the assumption that Cornell was one of these children here of Modena. Plus then she had 10 half siblings, step siblings. So I have 4 here. If I add up Cornell, that makes 5. And then I have 4 over here that would obviously be stepchildren to her. So that only adds up to 9. I'm still missing a half sibling of Virginia's. But that starts to give me a little bit more information. So then I look to the 1930 and 40 census. In the 1930 census, Dana becomes Dovey, but it actually looks like Donnie on the image, and it looked like Dawn before. And so she is obviously being called by a nickname. We have no clue what her real name is at this point. But the 2 sets of 4 older children are gone. So who is left in the family is Cornell, which was Cornell. The A's and the O's were mixed up a little bit. Kelly, who is 12, and Virginia is 10. They're all 10 years older. So because of those sets of children being together, and they're all being 10 years older, I know this is the correct family, even though the parents' names can be kind of skewed. And they add a son, age 7, who was born in 1923. So then in the 1940 census, J.H. Walton and Doris, it actually looks like Donnie on the image, and Dwight is 17. So I know that's the family again in 1940 because Dwight is 10 years older. Virginia is actually still living with the family. She is 10 years older. She is married, and there's a grandchild, Sandra Mayton. Her husband is not listed in the census, but that confirms that that was her married name because Virginia is living with Dwight, who I know is her brother, and she's listed as being married, even though her husband isn't listed there, and she has a child, Sandra Mayton. So I know I found the correct obituary listing 10 half siblings and 4 siblings. So now I come back to my mind map and I look at that again and say, this has got to be, then I've got Cornell, Kelly, Virginia. Cornell's got to come over here. Kelly, Virginia, Dwight would be 3. I'm still missing some children. So then finally, I come across John Henry Walton in Find a Grave. He did not come up at first for me because I was actually using Jack to search with. And once I started to use John to search with, and Family Search had realized I was looking who I was looking for, it's that if then kind of thing, there was a record hint of a Find a Grave. So Carnell Ida May, that's the baby, was born on June 1915. Her mother, Modena, which was correct, she belonged to Modena, dies in May of 1916. So she was just a baby, just about a year old when her mother died. So John marries Donnie in 1916, and Kelly is born in 1917. Then they also, in the family plot, was Iris R. Walton. She was born in 1920 and died in 1921. She is the missing sibling to Virginia. She's buried in the family plot, but she never showed up in any census, and her mother is Donnie. So who is the missing half sibling? We're still only 9 half siblings, but we do have found the 4 siblings listed in the obituary. So the missing half sibling is actually listed in Find a Grave. That was just such a bonus. His name is John Tunstall Walton. So he's born in 1911, and he's not listed in any family census records. His mother is Modena, who died in 1916. So he's listed there, but I'm thinking, what happened to him in the census? So I go back and look, and I find him. A search for John Tunstall Walton shows him living with his mother's parents in 1920 when he was 5. That's why he never showed up in the 1920 census. And actually, Tunstall is her maiden name. She gave that maiden name to her son, which led me then to be able to find her last name and her as a child with her parents. So I was able to look up Modena Tunstall living with her parents in earlier census and found several other family members. So here is an example of what the Find a Grave looks like. There's a great picture of an amazing man, John Walton, who ended up with actually taking care of 14 children, 11 at one time. It also lists his birth and his death, his parents on Find a Grave, his siblings, and there is Charlie right there, Charles Willoughby or Charlie Walton, which was great because then that verified that census that I knew. And then it lists his spouse. So the first spouse is Modena Adeline Tunstall, and her children, Robert, Ul, Lois, Deline, and that's why she was also known as D-Teen, various other kinds of things. She was known as Lois, spelled funny like a guy's name, and D-Teen. And then Irene Mavis, and then John Tunstall or Tuns Walton, and Rodney Ida May Carnell. So the South is known for giving their children lots of names and using lots of nicknames, so it can be kind of tricky. You have to even search on their nicknames, search on their real names, and see what records come up. The second part of this Find a Grave actually shows me a little bit more information here, and it shows the other spouse. So Donnie, Dana, Dovey, Dawn, whatever her nicknames were, and however they're written down, her real name is Caledonia Ardella. And then in parentheses, they put Donnie. She must have been known by Donnie most of the time. It also lists her maiden name as Ryder, her first married name as Formby, and then her second married name as Walton. This was such a great confirmation because all my assumptions were proving out true. And here are her 4 children, Kelly Augusta, and then Virginia was Dicey Virginia Dare Jenny. She was known by lots of little names there. And Iris R. or Celie Walton and Dwight Ryder. She also gave her son her maiden name, which is actually some great confirmation. And then his stepchildren here are listed as, these are Donnie's children, Ferris Gerald Formby. So notice how that was switched. In the census, it was listed as Formby Ferris. And I thought that was probably then his first name, but they had listed that first and then a little bit of an inset and listed the other children. So really they were identifying his previous last name, and then they tacked on Walton at the end because he was included in the family. So it was Ferris Gerald Formby, Lois Oreen Formby Hollis, gives her married name, Clifton Elias or Cliff Formby, and Gary Ralph Formby. So it was a very thorough find a grave. I was able to go and look up additional records and verify all of these people with additional documents to verify who they were. And so it lists then all the different links to the spouses and the children, and also indicates their calculated relationships. But I've been looking for the censuses, I've been looking for marriage and birth and death records, and being able to identify who the family was. So in the final mind map, it is now much larger than it was, and it actually lists, here is John Henry Walton, his birth and death. He was married to Caldonia Aradella or Donnie Ryder, and these were the children that they had together, those 4 children. And then he was married to Modena Adeline Tunstall, and those are the 6 children that they had together. Caledonia Ardella was married to Virgil Allen Formby, and those were the 4 children they had together. This helps me to answer my question, who is the mother of actually not just 11, but 14 children? So sorting that out and being able to identify those relationships, I couldn't have done it without drawing the diagram, asking the questions, and making lots of notes. So I'd like to share my screen with you to show you what John Henry Walton's page actually looks like, and to show you a few other little things on that page that might be helpful to you in your searching. Here we are on John Henry Walton's page, and I want to show you just a couple of features there. You can see John Henry Walton. I clipped the picture that was on Find a Grave and put it under memories so he could have honor him with a picture. I think he was an amazing guy to take care of so many children. There's his ID number, his birth and death. Just to show you something that might be useful is I've been so invested now in this family that I want to pay attention to them. So I'm going to click this little watch area. You see watch and there's a little star. So when I fill in the star, that means I get the opportunity to be filled in with information if anybody makes a change to his page. If I uncheck it, I will not be filled in if anybody makes a change. So I want to check that. And then some of the tips that I thought might be helpful here is to show you all changes. So as I scroll down on the right side, there's a little part right here that says latest changes. So I can show all, and that will give me a list of all of the things that people that have changed this particular page, and all the things that have happened. It tells me by specific reference. So you can tell I've been really the only one working on this page, but it will remind me of all the things that I did, the reasons that I have. And actually there's somebody else here who made one March 31st, and I can have opportunity to communicate with them. So that gives me an opportunity to see every single thing that had happened on that page and all the work that had been done on that page. So I thought that was something that might be helpful for you to know. If you've worked hard on a family, you might want to watch them, and then you might also want to view the latest changes. But as you're researching, there is a relatively new feature. It wasn't available to me previously to help me with this page, but under the tools right here, look at Find Similar People. When I click on Find Similar People, then the top person is going to be the person who I came from that page. And this is John Henry Walton, spouse Modena, his parents and things. But as I look at these are going to be siblings of his. And I can tell that because here I have his parents, John Robert Walton and Mary C. Eliza Molly Willoughby Walton. And so it lists parents, here's another sibling, here's the parents, here's another sibling. This can be so useful to find additional relationships. Sometimes it will show you a duplicate that you need to merge, and that can be very helpful too. But frequently I have found I can go directly to their siblings. There's Charlie. We had known him before. Interesting thing is he had a spouse called Donnie Caledonia. Where have we heard those names before? So they're common names in the South. So then you're going to find other ones that'll kind of wander off into England and other locations, but they're going to show you the ones that have the places and the relationships that could be true for that person when you click on find similar people right there. One thing I wanted to remind you about, come back to here, John Walton's page, was what is the best way to research? What do you do first? Okay, so I've come across this guy and I found a census on him because it was a record hint up here in this research help. You can see there aren't any now, but that's the first thing you want to do when you start researching is look at the record hints. The second thing that you want to do is to go from the person's page and search on Family Search. If you do happen to have a source, a record hint, then you want to open that and scroll down to see what are the similar historical records and who are they attached to. You can see this is actually attached to him and I've attached it, but those similar historical records are going to give you another place to look. If you've attached the record hints, you've looked at similar records, you want to come to searching from their page and going into Family Search historical records. They'll pre-fill in the blanks for you. That is going to be your most efficient way of searching. Obviously, too, when you search Ancestry, Find My Past, My Heritage, or Ginny Annette from their page, it's also going to pre-fill in some blanks for you. And that can be very useful. If you don't have a subscription to these websites, you can see them in the Family History Center. But when you come from their page, it will give you a different search than you would normally have. So even like if you do have an Ancestry account of your own, for example, you can open a tab, sign into Ancestry. I highly recommend you search from their page. That's going to give you a different pre-fill in the blank kind of a search than if you went just directly to Ancestry and did your search. If you don't have an Ancestry account, it can be helpful to search. They will allow you to see the search results. They just won't allow you to see the images, but it will give you a little bit of information there. And Ancestry is a great place to go on many US records. Find My Past is going to help you on UK records, also Canadian records, and actually also the Catholic Philadelphia Diocese and other Catholic dioceses have records on Find My Past. And then My Heritage is a great worldwide website. They have a lot of strength in their family trees, particularly in communist countries or other countries where government records are not easily available. And they pretty much have duplicated a lot of entries on Family Search Family Tree too. Ginny Annette is one that uses Central European records, and it will allow you to find a lot of French records, but other kind of random Turkish or Czechoslovakian. It's always a good place to check if you have any Central European ancestry. So after I've gone to their person pages, then the next, you don't want to forget going to the timeline. I want to see what that map looks like. I want to have an opportunity to really get a better view of that so that timeline can help me. And I can see that some of his children ended up dying or in a variety of other places. Their family did migrate from Tennessee over to Arkansas. And then after that, I want to go to search records and I want to have an opportunity to check all of these records. The map is my favorite place to go to be able to find those. Then I would search on other websites. Be sure and check out the file that we have posted on our Facebook group here that talks about other websites, like the Family History Guide is fabulous, or many other places that you might go to look. So that's kind of an order of searching. If you're new to searching, remember the very first thing you do is to sign on to Family Search, go to that person's page and use up the record hints.
Thank you, Shelley, for introducing us to the Walton family, a beautiful family with their 14 children. When I think about that family, I'm reminded of the scripture found in Psalms 127, verses 2 and 5. It reads, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them." John and his wife are only one example of the many, many parents in history who have taken seriously the Lord's command to value, love, and care for their children. We invite each of you to remember to do the same in your own families. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time where we'll instruct you on using the Family Search Tree app. Thanks again.
Bye.